You're not broke because you don't make enough money. You're broke because you don't control it. And that truth is uncomfortable. It's the kind of truth people avoid because it forces them to take responsibility. It forces them to stop blaming everything around them and start looking at themselves, their habits, their choices, their behavior. Because if the problem is outside of you, you don't have to change. But if the problem is inside you, then everything changes. And most people are not ready for that. They keep telling themselves the same story. If I just earn more, I'll be fine. If I just get a better job, everything will change. If I just get one opportunity, I'll fix everything. But they never stop to ask the real question. What will you do differently when that money comes? Because if your habits don't change, your situation won't either. More money with the same mindset is not growth. It's just a bigger version of the same problem. Look around carefully. There are people making good money and still living with stress, still checking their bank account before making basic decisions, still feeling pressure at the end of the month, still trapped in a cycle they don't understand. And that's because money without discipline doesn't create freedom. It creates illusion. It makes you feel like you're doing better, while quietly keeping you stuck. And that's the danger. Because when something feels normal, you stop questioning it. You stop noticing the pattern. You stop realizing that you are repeating the same behavior over and over again. Earning, spending, stressing, repeating. And slowly, that becomes your life. Not because you chose it consciously, but because you never stop to change it. There comes a moment where life forces you to pay attention, where you can no longer ignore your financial reality, where responsibilities increase, where pressure builds, where small mistakes start having bigger consequences. And in that moment, everything becomes clear. You realize that money is not just about survival, it's about stability. It's about control. It's about the ability to breathe without constantly worrying about what comes next. And if you don't have discipline, you don't have that control. Because discipline is what stands between you and chaos. Without it, your decisions are driven by emotion. And emotional decisions with money always lead to problems. You spend when you feel good. You spend when you feel bad. You spend when you're bored. You spend when you want to escape. You spend when you want to feel important. You spend when you want to keep up with others. And every time you do that, you lose control. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you look around and realize that you've built a life that feels heavy. A life where money is always on your mind. Life where you are constantly thinking about what you can afford and what you cannot. A life where you feel restricted. And that feeling, that quiet pressure, is what most people live with every single day. But they accept it because they think it's normal. Because everyone around them is experiencing the same thing. Because no one is talking about discipline. Everyone is talking about earning. Everyone is talking about success. Everyone is talking about lifestyle, but very few people are talking about control. And control is everything, because without control, money owns you. It dictates your decisions. It limits your options. It creates stress in moments where you should feel peace. And the worst part is, you don't even realize how much it's affecting you. It affects how you think, how you plan, how you react, how you feel. It becomes part of your daily life. And that's when it becomes dangerous, because now you are no longer in control. Your habits are, and habits are powerful. They are built through repetition, through small actions repeated over time. And those small actions become your identity. If you repeatedly spend without thinking, you become someone who lacks control. If you repeatedly act on impulse, you become someone driven by emotion. If you repeatedly avoid responsibility, you become someone who stays stuck. But the opposite is also true. If you repeatedly choose discipline, you become someone who is in control. If you repeatedly delay gratification, you become someone who builds stability. If you repeatedly act with intention, you become someone who creates freedom. And that is the power of discipline. It doesn't just change your finances. It changes who you are. It changes how you think, how you behave, how you make decisions. And those changes shape your entire life. There will be moments where discipline feels like a burden, where it feels like you are restricting yourself, where it feels like you are saying no too often, where it feels like life is passing you by while others are enjoying it. And in those moments, it's easy to question yourself, to wonder if it's worth it, to feel like you are missing out. But what you don't see is what comes later, because the people who choose comfort today often struggle tomorrow, and the people who choose discipline today create ease tomorrow. That's the trade. That's the reality. And most people don't see it until it's too late. They spend years chasing comfort, only to end up with pressure. They spend years avoiding discipline, only to face consequences. They spend years reacting instead of building, and by the time they realize it, they are already deep in the cycle. But you don't have to stay there. Because the moment you decide to build discipline, everything starts to shift. Not instantly, not dramatically, but slowly. You start noticing your behavior. You start catching your impulses. You start thinking before acting. You start asking yourself questions. Do I really need this? Is this helping my future? Am I acting emotionally or intentionally? And those questions create awareness, and awareness creates change. Because once you see your patterns clearly, you cannot ignore them. You cannot go back to unconscious behavior. You start making different choices, small choices, quiet choices, choices no one else sees. But those choices are everything. Because your life is not shaped by big decisions. It is shaped by small ones repeated daily. And discipline lives in those small moments. In the moment you choose not to spend. In the moment you choose to save. In the moment you choose to stay consistent. In the moment you choose long-term thinking over short-term pleasure. And those moments add up. They build something, not just financially, but mentally. They build strength, patience, control. And those qualities are rare, because most people don't have them. Most people react. Most people chase. Most people follow their emotions. But you are building something different, something stronger, something that lasts. And that takes time. It takes repetition. It takes consistency. It takes the ability to keep going, even when it feels slow, even when it feels boring, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because something is happening. You are changing. Your mindset is evolving. Your habits are shifting. Your identity is transforming. And one day, it becomes visible. You start seeing the results. You start feeling lighter. You start experiencing less stress. You start realizing that you are no longer controlled by money. You are in control of it. And that feeling, that quiet confidence, is something most people never experience. Because they never stay consistent long enough. They quit too early. They go back to old habits. They choose comfort over discipline. And they stay stuck. But you don't have to, because discipline is a choice. A daily choice. A repeated choice. A choice to do what is right, even when it is hard. Even when it is uncomfortable. Even when it requires sacrifice. Because that sacrifice is not loss. It is investment. Investment in your future, investment in your peace, investment in your freedom, and that investment always pays off. But only if you stay consistent, only if you keep going, only if you refuse to go back. Because once you build discipline, you build control, and once you have control, everything changes. You stop reacting, you start deciding, you stop chasing, you start building, you stop feeling trapped, you start feeling free. And that is the ultimate goal. Not just money, but freedom. The freedom to choose. The freedom to think. The freedom to live without constant pressure. And that freedom comes from discipline, not from luck, not from opportunity, but from consistent, intentional behavior over time. So if you feel stuck right now, if you feel like money is controlling your life, if you feel like nothing is changing, understand this: you are not stuck. You are just undisciplined, and that can change, but only if you decide to change it, only if you commit, only if you stay consistent, no matter what. Because the same habits that created your current life can be replaced with habits that build a better one. But that requires effort, it requires patience, it requires discipline, and most importantly, It requires you to keep going, even when it's hard, even when it's slow, even when it feels like nothing is working. Because something is working. You are building something, something strong, something real, something that will change your life. And one day, you will look back and realize that everything changed. Not because you earned more, not because you got lucky, but because you became disciplined, because you stayed consistent, because you refused to go back, because you kept going, no matter what. And that's when your life truly changes. Not when money comes in, but when control takes over. And once you have control, you don't lose it, because discipline becomes who you are.